Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of And Yet We Believe. I am Roger Pimentel. This is Ann Pimentel.
Hello.
And we are a married couple having honest conversations about the beautiful, messy middle of Latter-day Saint life. What are we talking about today?
So today we've got a great topic. We are going to talk about what it was like when we were stage one believers. This is something that anyone that was raised in Christianity has gone through this stage. Maybe they're still in it. Maybe you've moved on, but we've all been there.
Right.
And for us, I'll just jump in again. For us, it was a good multiple decades of being there.
Yeah. And so, of course, we're referring again, as we often do, to Brian McLaren's Stages of Faith model, as he details in his book, Faith After Doubt, which is great. And so we're talking about stage one, which is where everybody begins.
Right. There's a lot, like, as children, stage one is really important for children because children need to learn structure. They need rules. They need a path, a line to go down. Authority is really important because children rely on authority. And so it's natural for a child to be a stage one believer. They see good and bad. There's black and white. It's very binary thinking, and it works really well as you're growing up.
Right, and it makes sense that stage one is kind of a default state, right, of belief, because you are inheriting this from your parents, from the authority figures in your life. Your parents take you to, assuming you're raised in the church, your parents are taking you to church from the time that you're very, very little. And so this is just the way that you're programmed. This is just the way that you're wired until you reach a different stage later. But this kind of black and white stage, things are true or false, everything's very, very clear. That's the default inherited state for somebody who's raised in the church.
Right. And I think, like we're saying, it's natural for children to be in this. When you're a teenager, you definitely start to figure out, how do I feel about this? And maybe you start asking some questions. And then by the time you reach your 20s, for most people, that's when you maybe start to differentiate a little bit. And you really, along those maybe last 10 years in your teens and early 20s, you're really trying to figure out, is this for me? What is my testimony? I need something separate from what the authority, my parents or whoever it is has told me. And so you're really trying to make it your own. Some people, for some people, doubts enter at that point, and they're kind of kicked into a different stage. Some people get those doubts and just rely on the authority and they stay in that stage one. And that's fine. We did that probably until our 30s.
Right.
To mid 30s.
and sometimes the stages blur a little bit. And so we're talking about stage one today. There may be stage two that's in there as well. But let's talk just a little bit more about what this looks like when you're not a child, but you are in this stage one, maybe stage two environment. And I'll kick this off by saying, even up through being a teenager, going on a mission, coming back, I was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because I had inherited that, because that was my default state. And I want to be super clear that doesn't mean I didn't have a testimony.
Right.
That doesn't mean I hadn't read the scriptures, prayed about it, received a testimony of the Book of Mormon, with Moroni 10, 3-5, all of these things. The fact that I had been raised in it and inherited it did not mean that I did not have a reliable, durable testimony.
Right. And for me, I'm the youngest of 4 daughters. And as I was growing up, my 2 older sisters left the house and left the church kind of at the, those things happened at the same time. And I don't remember if both, but one went to the University of Utah. And so in my mind, you go to the you lose your testimony. And so when I was applying to college as a teenager, I was terrified. And I was like, I'm only applying to BYU because I don't want to lose my testimony.
That's such a neat and tidy example of the black and white perspective on
right.
that.
So I only applied there. I only applied to BYU, and if I didn't get in, I wasn't going to go to college. Like, that's what that literally is what I was. That was my path, and luckily I got in.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but I also at the same time, like, if there were religious books that were not written by church authorities or members, don't read them. If there's Christian music that is not done by Motab or
an LDS artist,
Kurt Bester or whoever it is, don't listen to it. And Christian music, like, that's about Jesus.
Right.
But I was not, like, I was afraid to listen to that stuff.
Everybody that wasn't on our team was on a different team.
Right.
And there was good guys and bad guys.
Right. I remember probably it was early in our marriage. There was a Utah mommy blogger that I loved. Okay. I followed everything she did. It was, there were a lot of mommy bloggers at that time, but she ended up leaving the church and I clicked unfollow.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid of what she would say that would lead me away. I was so naive. I mean, I really was. I really was like, there is one authority, there is one right way. I was a black and white thinker for a long, long time.
So now let's flip the script a little bit. Let's keep talking about people who are operating in stage one, but let's talk about the good that they bring.
Mm-hmm.
First up, people who are operating in stage one serve valiantly in callings. Mm-hmm. They are teaching our children in primary. They're teaching our youth. They're counting our tithing. They're
running the church.
100%.
They're mission presidents, they're general authorities.
Bishops, Relief Society presidents,
yeah.
All over the place doing really admirable service across the board.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that there aren't people in other stages that are also doing those things,
of course.
But we're just saying, like, they are bringing a lot. I think that stage one believers are probably really great for bishops or church leaders that are extending callings, and the people just say yes because you say yes to callings.
Yep.
So they're probably just a lovely person to have in the ward.
I remember being in a bishopric and extending a calling to somebody, and they went, no. And I was like, what?
Those words aren't the ones that should be coming out.
It was so unsettling. Like, what is going on here? That's not the script.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how this works.
Yeah.
But stage one, folks operating out of stage one, I'm trying to not put too many labels on because somebody can move into different stages. But when people are operating in stage one, they are delivering meals to people. They're putting on funerals. They're cleaning the chapel. They're serving in the temple. They're going on missions. All of these things. And again, that can be true of people in any stage. But I really want to highlight that people operating out of this stage may just be the backbone of the church.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, for sure, because the church is a stage one church, right? The institution has to be a stage one because that's how churches and institutions function.
And that's largely because of the orientation around authority.
Right. And that's another thing, characteristic of stage one people is that they rely and defer completely to authority. They, like handbooks, policies, anything, church doctrine, all of that is like the final word, and you don't push past that.
Right. If you heard President Hinckley's talk when he said that women shouldn't have more than one set of earrings, or that he didn't think they should, this was in year 2000, if you're the person who took out your second set and never put them back in at that point, that's a stage one response, largely. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that, again, stage two or stage three folks wouldn't do the same, but that kind of orientation around this is what the prophet said and that goes, no questions asked, that is characteristic of the stage as well.
Yeah. So I was trying to think excuse me, I was trying to think today about when in my life I was like a really true blue stage one believer, and of course my mission came to my mind. I was all in on as a missionary, as most missionaries are, right? I don't think I had ever had a negative thought or a hard thought toward the church ever.
Okay.
Everything was good. Everything worked for me. The church was just perfect. I was not concerned about women's issues in the church.
Okay.
Like that was not on my radar. Issues that marginalized people face in the church, not on my radar. I was not aware of any of it. I didn't even know like history of the church, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know the full facts of all of the history of the church that I now know. And I was reading through some of my mission journals today, and there were just little things that started to stand out to me of how, like little stage 1 phrases that I would use every once in a while. I talked a lot about, a meeting was so good and so strong. The spirit was so strong. I was crying so much. And just like conflating those two of the spirit being there and strong and crying because of it. That was like, that's how you felt the spirit was. You had tears and it was very emotional. And there were things like I was telling you a little while ago, there was this older man. I said in my journal that he had to have been about 160 years old. He was really old. He was not a member, but his wife and daughter and granddaughter were. And I had said, we kind of talked Alfredo into getting baptized today. Hopefully he goes through with it because his family needs to be sealed forever. Not because Alfredo needed it in his life, not because he needed to be closer to Jesus or to know Jesus or whatever. It was because his family needed to be sealed, which is important.
Sure.
Sealing is important.
Valid.
But I was teaching probably for a lot of the wrong reasons. And I was not focusing on Jesus the way that I could have it holds a bigger importance to me now to turn people to Jesus instead of like the other things.
Right.
If you follow Jesus, those other things might follow, but I was concerned about pushing other things on people.
Right. Okay, so we've laid the groundwork on stage 1 believers, which we were for many years. Everybody starts there. Some people move out of that stage earlier or later in life or not at all. But Brian McLaren calls this faith before doubt.
Yeah.
And I really like that characterization, partly because that gives some grace to people in stage 1. Like, great. If you've never had to go through that, that's fantastic. But it also gives grace to those who kind of ended up getting pushed out of that stage and into a later stage because doubt comes in, and it comes in different ways. Different people have different life events, or you just get to a stage in your spiritual maturity where that stage 1 posture isn't serving you anymore. Right.
And as a stage 1 believer, you might hear about questions or things, you might hear about polygamy, some weird polygamy story, and you're like, wow, that's weird. Glad that's over.
Right.
And like, so you hear things, you're aware of some stuff, but you just don't give it that much thought. You just kind of brush it aside. Like, that's an abstract thought. I'm not going to worry too much about that. A lot of people put stuff on their shelf. That's a really familiar phrase. So like, it's not that you're just closed-minded and in a bubble and you're walking around going la 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 with your hands in your ears, but when you hear that stuff, you do something different than have curiosity about it.
Right.
And that protects us. Like that feels safe in so many ways.
It does.
I don't want to say it's ignorance because, like I said, like you hear this stuff, but that phrase of ignorance is bliss does have a little, it rings true a little bit.
Makes some sense here. And now what we really want to get to and what we really want to talk about is that for people in later stages, and we often talk about ourselves being stage 3, perplexity largely. I think a lot of folks listening to the podcast consider themselves in that group as well. And I know I can speak for myself. I tend to be pretty dismissive of people that are in stage 1, and they are ignorant, and they are
closed-minded,
plugging their ears, closed-minded for sure. And these are things that I show up to church and I I shouldn't think about other people and I shouldn't judge in that way. But these are things that I think about other people. And that's really where we want to sit with this today, is how do we have grace for people in stage 1 where we used to be?
Right. Well, and that should be the easiest thing for us, is to say, like, you hear a comment or something in Sunday school, or maybe a certain talk is given in a certain way, and you say, I remember what it was like to think that, to believe in that way. And yeah, maybe it can soften your heart a little of like, yeah, that was some time in my life and it worked and it was okay. And it's okay that I'm in a different place now, but it's okay that that person is there now as well.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the natural instinct to do that. I think the natural instinct is to want to convince people and want to argue with them and say, no, you need to become more enlightened like I am. Right? And let me help you, because you're clearly still in stage 1 and I'm so far beyond that.
Yeah. So when I was reading in my journal, some of the stuff that I wrote was really cringy to me now. Like, I read it now, having moved past that kind of way to believe things. And I'm like, why did I think that? Why did I say that? Why was I that person? But like, the way that Brian McLaren talks about stages of faith is that they're concentric circles. Right. And so these things are still in me. They've made me who I am. They've given me the experiences that have, built up my life to be what it is right now. And I can't hate former me.
Right.
Right? I don't even want to have pity on former me for not knowing better or not, whatever. Former me, stage 1 believer me, had a great church life. It was really good.
Well, and the way Brian McLaren describes it is stage 1 you is still in you.
Exactly.
And stage 1 me is still in me and still a part of me. So I have something I want to share on this, and I'm going to go kind of out on a limb here. Now, I am not a therapist. I cannot give in any sort of therapy type advice, but there is a modality that shows up sometimes in therapy called internal family systems, IFS.
Yeah.
And what that does is acknowledges that you might have different parts of you. And so I think it's really relevant here because there could be a stage 1 part of you that's still in there somewhere. Now, in IFS terms, you might call this an exile. And an exile is something that it represents trauma or pain. And so it's something that's still kind of lurking in there. And then you have these other parts that are called managers or firefighters. And again, this is way out of my depth here. But the managers are there to try to protect you. And again, these are parts of you. And so embedded in stage 1 is a grief, is a trauma of sorts, because that stage stopped serving you. That stage eventually collapsed. It was unsteady footing for you. And so you also have these managers in your brain, in you somewhere, trying to protect you and trying to save you from that. And I think those managers are giving you that mindset of, oh, that stage was dumb. And so that superiority is a coping strategy where we're saying, oh, I don't need that anymore. I'm above that. Because that was something that ended up bringing us grief.
Yeah.
And so that stage 1 is still in there, but we demean it and we diminish it within ourselves, which is then why we demean and diminish other people who are operating out of stage 1.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And it is interesting how our brain tries to protect us and like not justify things, but just like it looks out for us and, wants us to be healthy. And yeah, that's interesting. We've got a comment here that says, and I think this is an important thing to talk about because this is a really common thought when we talk about stage 1 belief. It says it's hard to have a soft heart towards old teachings or attitudes that contribute to abuse of vulnerable populations.
Yep.
Or we want to prevent others from similar abuse.
Yep.
It's really true. And there, I think that it's okay. What I love to say in this is be soft on the people and be hard on the systems.
Yep.
Right? The doctrine, the policies, the things, even church history, whatever it is that was harmful, absolutely bring it up.
Yep.
You know, those things need to be brought up. I wish our church apologized for things better at all. But we can be soft on the people that maybe made a mistake or, you know, thought something wrong or whatever. And so that's not excusing, like, that if there's an abuser of children, being soft on that person often looks like holding them to you know, have some accountability,
for
right?
Sure. Yeah.
And making sure that they are taking, like, everything needs to be taken care of. We need to circle around the victim, and we need to make sure that they are okay, and it is loving, and, you know, justice and mercy are what Jesus taught, right?
Right.
Both things go hand in hand.
And we've seen both of these come up in our ward, where there are very stage 1 comments being made that are fine, that are benign, that don't hurt anybody. And there have been stage 1 comments made that have been hurtful. And that's when something needs to be said. And yeah, you do need to speak up. You know, maybe somebody needs to talk to the person who said it, that sort of thing. So that there is a difference. And we're talking largely about having grace for the people operating in stage 1. And I like the way that you set that up. And even kind of tying the last few minutes of what we've been talking to together, it starts with having grace for our past selves, for the stage 1 part that is in us.
Yeah.
And I think once we can do that, we can extend it to others.
Yeah, we believed those things, we taught those things, and we probably caused a lot of harm.
Right.
But that always reminds me of the Maya Angelou quote that says, when we know better, we do better. For a lot of stage 1 people, they don't know all the time what hurts, what is,
right.
You know, I will say, when I was in that stage, I thought I was defending the church. I thought I was standing up for my faith and standing up for Jesus. And these were really important things to me. I didn't realize how hurtful they were to other people.
Right.
I didn't realize how scriptures are used as weapons. I didn't realize these things were happening and that I was helping. I was doing those things.
Right.
And so that is, you know, that's looking back now saying, now I see that stuff hurt.
Right.
And so when somebody does make a comment, like you're saying, that is hurtful, it is helpful to say in a kind way, with love and mercy, because that's how Jesus does it, to say, let me show you a different way. Let me share a different experience. And hopefully, we said last week in the podcast, hopefully they'll have a crack of curiosity.
Right.
And that something will open in them and they can see a little different.
Right.
And that might just be a seed that's planted at that point.
Yeah. Now, this stage 3 mindset, you know, I mentioned this kind of sense of superiority that comes along with it. That's not the best characteristic of this stage, certainly. But it made me think, when we read the New Testament, when we read in 3rd Nephi, when Jesus comes to the Nephites, the things that he taught us to do are the things we listed earlier that people in stage 1 are doing.
Yeah.
Serving others, being kind, you know, all of these sorts of things. What Jesus didn't say is that we have to know certain things, or that we have to believe things a certain way, or that we have to think about things a certain way. I realized I don't think God cares what stage we're in.
Yeah.
And this was like a lightning bolt moment for me of like, oh, well, I consider myself stage 3 and this is so spiritually mature and whatever. And I don't actually think that that's a factor in our future salvation or exaltation. I just don't think it comes up.
Yeah. Well, I think that speaks to the scripture of knowing God knows what's in our heart.
Right.
They can see inside of us, and if you you know, if you are a nasty person and you're nasty in your heart, and that's coming out in your faith stage, you know, in the way that you are a believer, God's going to know that.
Right.
But if your heart is good and your intentions are good, even though you stumble, I mean, that's what repentance is. Like, that's the whole point of Christ's teachings, right?
Well, and the superiority and the judging others, this is like squarely in Pharisee territory, right? Like, Jesus talked about this specifically. Not that this kind of stage 3 characteristic was great, but that the Pharisees were doing it wrong with this superiority sort of thing. And, you know, how much we know about church history doesn't matter. These sorts of things. If you want to plug your ears and ignore polygamy or race in the priesthood, I mean, I guess you can. I can't.
Yeah.
But maybe some people can. And so to kind of put a bow on this, I saw this bit from a comedian today.
Okay.
And she was saying, I read a lot of theology books. I'm hoping heaven has an AP test so I can test out of being a good person. And I think that's a little bit of the stage 3 mindset, is like, oh yes, I've read so much and I'm so knowledgeable about these things. The knowledge isn't what matters. Just doesn't care.
It's your actions. It's what you do with people.
Right.
I mean, that's what Jesus taught was, you know, how are you treating the people that are around you?
Right.
Well,
I was just going to add, I have a quote from James Fowler, Dr. James Fowler,
okay.
Who's kind of the godfather of faith stages, from his book, aptly called Stages of Faith. And he's talking, now his writing is very dense and it's very academic. And so just to set the stage, he's talking about how the point is never to move to a different stage. The point is to make the most of the stage you're in.
Okay.
He says, for persons in a given stage at the right time for their lives, the task is the full realization and integration of the strengths and graces of that stage, rather than rushing on to the next stage. Each stage has the potential for wholeness, grace, and integrity, and for strength sufficient for either life's blows or blessings. And I think that's probably the way God looks at this as well. You're stage 1, you're stage 3, whatever. Are you living it to its fullest? Are you taking advantage of the blessings that you've been given, whatever they may be?
Yeah. That also speaks to a teaching that we've been hearing a lot about in our living school that we're doing for the Center of Action and Contemplation, about what is your place to stand in the world? What is there's a quote from, is it, who is it? Archimedes, yeah. Where he says, give me a lever and a place to stand and I'll change the world. I'll move the world. And so we've been talking about what is your lever and what is your place to stand in the world to make change. And if we think about that within the stages of faith, are you using a lever? Are you, do you have a place to stand? And what is your work to do in this world?
Yeah.
And that's going to be different for everybody in their stages of faith. And the goal, of course, is to do it without harming others. Right? Changing for the better, not changing for worse things.
Yeah. So I think the challenge, the homework, I guess, for this week is, and it's for me as much as it is for anybody or for you, which is sometimes it's hard for me to go sit in church and be surrounded by people operating in stage 1 and hear the things that they say. And I want to be dismissive and I want to judge them. And I want to think of myself as superior to them. And I think what that means is I am not honoring my stage 1 self that I was for many years and that still lives in me. And so I think if I can honor that in myself, I can honor that in my other people. Easier said than done.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's the challenge.
Well, and I have a couple little tips on how to do that.
Oh,
so I'm glad you brought that up.
Woo! Okay, here we go.
Just 2 little things.
Okay.
Try to understand and don't assume. That's one. Try to understand and don't make assumptions about people. Recognize that everyone's spiritual path is unique. Try to see the whole picture of their choices and remember only God sees their heart. So kind of what we were talking about earlier. And then the second thing is to ask questions, don't make statements. Instead of saying, you shouldn't do that, just say instead, help me understand your thinking on this, or what led you to this decision? What led you to believe that certain doctrinal piece in that way. Maybe they have some wild story that you can't even imagine that made them have this belief. And that is their truth. It is living authentically to their experiences to exhibit their faith in that way.
Yeah.
And so to be curious about people instead of just making assumptions, especially when we were there as stage 1 believers, we can give some people some grace and understanding as we talk to them.
Yeah. Now there's a question here in the chat, and maybe this can be our last bit here as we wrap up. Is there a way to go about raising radical awareness without it coming off as superiority? Very, very interesting. And then follow up, because when abuse has led some to lose their lives, how do you decide which lives matter most? Well, that's super challenging when we put it into that sort of context. But maybe if we just take the first part of that question about raising radical awareness without it coming off as superiority. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's, again, how you are treating the matter. If you're going to be soft on the person and hard on the system, there are any number of things broken in our world right now. Systems that are broken in our nation. Let's even just pull it in a little tighter. And the people that are causing that harm, something I learned from Father Gregory Boyle, the people that are causing the harm and causing the issues right now are not well. In a mental state, they are not well. And to say that somebody that is causing harm is not well humanizes that person.
Right. And we're not talking about specific individuals, just talking about people who are harming people are not well.
And the system that they are often using to do that harm is beyond broken. And so I think that, we can talk about issues and not say, like, I have all of the answers. I know I'm better at this than you are. That's how we keep the superiority at bay. I think coming together as a community to find solutions, using even like sitting at the table with the people that are causing harm. And again, it's different when it is like somebody is beating someone else. You don't take that person to the table and say, let's talk about this. We're not talking about that sort of thing. When policies are causing harm, like you need to be able to talk to people and work together, bipartisan, that sort of thing, to really come out with solutions. And when you're doing it in a community-minded way, in a nonviolent way, like Martin Luther King talked about, that keeps the superiority at bay.
Yeah, and if we broaden the question a little bit, we talked a little bit last week about how you can't really push somebody out of their stage. They'll only move out when they are ready. And so it's a little bit like fishing. We can put a line in the water. And if people do have those cracks of curiosity, if they're in a position to take that, then they can move into a new stage. They can see things a little differently. They can see things a little more like you or I do. But a lot of that is going to depend on them, and that can be very frustrating because you want to grab somebody by the lapels and shake them and say, why can't you see this the way that I do? But it really depends deeply on them being able to come to the table in that way.
And clearly when there are victims that are losing their lives, those, like, that has to be talked about, that their life has to matter. And, there's a lot of things that are going on right now where people are losing their lives or are being harmed in really horrible and disgusting ways. And that's when you go hard on the system. Right? That's when you point out, like, I mean, it makes me think of 2020 when George Floyd was murdered. Think about how much changed in the months following. There were so many policy changes that because of his murder, his death, and unfortunately it took a death to get us to have this racial reckoning in the world. And luckily, can we even use that word? Luckily, people were in place to make changes in those policies, to start DEI programs, to start things that were going to be helping and bringing people to more awareness. Unfortunately, a lot of that is changing, but that when somebody unfortunately loses a life, look at the system and start. I mean, maybe that's your place to stand. Maybe that's the lever in the world that you need to make change. And it really is unfortunate when it comes at a loss of life.
Yeah. And so maybe just one last thought. If we go to the scriptures and what Jesus taught, he said, "Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me." And so that can apply to marginalized communities like we're just talking about right now. And this can also mean the people with the simplest faith. And if we're out there and we're judging and we're diminishing people whose faith is simple and pure and reliable, mocking them, looking down on them, that's not what Jesus taught us to do.
It doesn't help build any community, any beloved community or Zion or,
Right. And I think we can see them and we can meet them where they are and we can acknowledge because we have been there as well.
Yep. All right. Thanks for joining us tonight. Love this conversation. Jump in the comments anywhere you are listening, watching, whatever you're doing. Let's keep the conversation going.
And thanks to everybody who joined us live and for the comments and questions. And we will see you all next time.
Good night.